Welcome to the Legally Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Rob Hanna. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Ben White. Ben is an excellent, inclusive community builder and the proud founder of Crafty Counsel, a media platform for in-house counsels and other legal professionals to connect with each other. Ben trained at Clifford Chance before advancing to senior associate within their corporate finance team. He then moved to Global Fashion Group and was the group corporate counsel at the London headquarters. So a very, very warm welcome, Ben.
Rob, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. What an honour.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you. So the honour is all ours. And before we dive into all your amazing projects and achievements and what you've achieved to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the show. So on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality?
Well, I think it's a 6. Yeah, I think everyone says, well, being a lawyer is nothing like Suits, but there were definite moments in there. There was one in the first season where I can't remember the name of the guy, but he goes into some room where he's told, "Can you just take care of this documentation?" And it's a room full of boxes and boxes and boxes of docs that need to be reviewed, sorted, maybe paginated or bundled or something. And I was like, yeah, that's real. I remember that. So, I think there's definitely a fair amount of truth in there among the fiction.
Yeah, good. And justified with a 6. So we will move swiftly on. So let's start at the beginning, Ben. Tell us a bit about your background and career journey.
Sure. So background, as you mentioned earlier on the podcast, Rob, so I started my career at Clifford Chance. I spent 7 years there. Trainee, qualified in the corporate team, and spent some time there working in China. Did a secondment to the government. Generally enjoyed myself. Lots of hard work, but learned lots of good things and really great people there before moving in-house.
Yeah, and what a success story it's been throughout your career. But prior to that, you studied modern history at the University of Oxford before then going to study the law. So where did your initial interest in the law stem from?
Well, Rob, I'm sure many of your listeners will empathise that people who study degrees, like humanities degrees, like history or English, then when they get into the world of work, start to scratch their heads and wonder, right, what am I going to do with this? And it's a fairly well-trodden path from a degree like that to law. You know, history is reading lots of long books and coming up with arguments and synthesizing things. And there's a bunch of skills in there which are not too dissimilar to some of the work that lawyers do. So of my group in my college at Oxford, I think we were about 12 studying history in that college, and something like 8 became trainees in law firms. So, if not more. So, it's a well-trodden path. But so I have family connections. My dad's a lawyer. My brother's a lawyer. So there's a little bit of a path there of almost sort of falling into it. But so that was certainly some inspiration. But I think early on I had this feeling that I might not be practicing law forever. And indeed, although it was a lot of fun, and I'm still in the legal sector, I'm not too surprised that we're on today. I'm doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely going to talk a little bit more about what you're getting up to currently. But sort of when you mentioned at the start and just briefly that you did go on to then train at Clifford Chance and completed 6-month seats in corporate banking, international arbitration, and the corporate seat in Shanghai. So what were those experiences of working abroad for you like so early on in your career?
I really enjoyed it. So I had a slightly... I did one unusual thing from the path from history at Oxford to Clifford Chance, and that's that I stuck around at Oxford for a couple of extra years and did a master's in Chinese studies. What that means is research on modern Chinese history and writing dissertation and all that stuff, and also studying Mandarin. And the connection to your question about then working abroad at Clifford Chance was that I've spent some time in China and invested a fair amount of time into learning about China. before starting my training contract. And so I pushed quite hard then when I was at CC to get an opportunity to go over to Shanghai. A lot of some of the other overseas offices, it was a bit more sort of tried and tested that they'd usually take several London trainees at a time. Shanghai, not so much. And actually, one of the nice things about that was I was the only one there from CC, and there was a small number of other trainees on secondment from their firms in London over in Shanghai. There were 2 from Eversheds at that time, a couple from Linklaters, a couple from Freshfields, and so on. But it meant that actually we sort of gravitated towards each other as our sort of ready-made buddies in China, all doing something similar for 6 months, and that made actually quite a sort of tight social group out in Shanghai. So that was a great experience, definitely a highlight of being at CC. But actually, throughout my time at CC, I did get a chance to travel a fair amount. I went out to Chile on a bit of a business development trip. Got to go up a mine called the Los Palambres mine. So taking a little propeller plane out of Santiago up into the Andes Mountains and having a tour around that. That was quite an experience. Spent a little bit of time in Chicago, 3 weeks in Amsterdam on closing a coffee deal. So lots of travel, some and mostly very welcome. So.
Yeah, well, that's great that you did Chile and you went to the Windy City, one of my favorite places in the world. I love Chicago and Amsterdam. And it's great, like you say, you had all of those international experiences because naturally it just enhances your overall understanding and sort of, cultural differences and all those other things that are important as a lawyer. And you joined then the corporate finance team as an associate and then senior associate. So what skills did you learn as a senior associate, but perhaps different to that as an associate that's helped you where you are today?
Rob, I was promoted to senior associate months before I left Clifford Chance. So, so it wasn't, I would say, I think that particular moment wasn't a massive transition, but I would say, I was 4.5 years qualified when I left. And, you learn an awful lot in a short period of time, particularly in a really intense team like the transactional team in any big city law firm will give you a lot of experience. And so I felt I was definitely quite a different person, professionally at least, from when I left Clifford Chance to when I started it. And that was to do with some of the people I was working with, some of the stuff, some of the deals I was working on. One of the, I remember I joined Clifford Chance thinking that I really wanted to be a litigator. So I thought that's what, that was sort of, there's sort of this kind of magic dust over litigation as, I think they've done some really good, like internal branding or something, the litigation department. And so you had this sense of like, it's really hard to get into the litigation team as an associate. And, they're the really clever ones. And, you have to be a real superstar, et cetera, et cetera. And so I did corporate as my first seat. And by the time I sort of rotated through, I just realized that actually there was something special about what they were doing. And in particular, I remember looking at what some of the stuff that the senior associates were doing and thinking as a trainee, I just do not understand it. I do not know what I don't understand what they're doing. I remember the guy giving some advice on some aspect of the Companies Act. I'm thinking actually, that was hard. I've done some first draft memo for him and inevitably it just was utterly rewritten. And I remember thinking actually, presumably let's hope that I'm not a complete thicko and these people were moderately like me when I was a trainee. That sort of means probably if I stick around here, I'll end up moderately like them. And I thought that's probably a good idea, and that will be a good sort of path to walk at least for a while. So I guess that's a roundabout way of answering your question. Learned a lot, short space of time, and from a lot of very good people.
But there's a really good undertone in that as well. We talk about proximity as power and be surrounding yourself around those sort of people and just learning from them and, by osmosis and all of that experience you gain. So I think that's an invaluable share. So really appreciate that. And you touched on it before, but you did do a lot of traveling whilst you were with Clifford Chance. You mentioned you obviously visited the copper mines in Chile, one of the largest European coffee factories, Amsterdam, Paris, Chicago, Zurich, the list goes on. But is there one particular experience from those travels that's most memorable for you, and if so, why?
I think the hardest deal that I worked on, but also the one that probably taught me the most, was one that I worked on probably a year or so before I left, and that was this coffee joint venture where we ended up in Amsterdam. And it was memorable because it was just such a machine. We were working on the closing of a very, very complicated deal. 42 countries were involved, so that's local council in 42 jurisdictions. A fiendishly complicated tax steps plan translated into a fiendishly complicated series of sort of legal steps and documentation. Massive team, just generally a combination of sort of personally sort of quite stressful and sort of having to manage, become quite resilient and to sort of manage myself through that process, developing a lot of project management skills, not so much some technical legal stuff, but actually in that case, most of it was how are we going to get this done? How do we coordinate across all these places? I remember I think they they collapsed some walls in the internal offices, so I think we had extra big internal meeting rooms with big whiteboards sort of showing progress across all these countries and how we're going to do it. And it culminated in this trip to Amsterdam, where it was a Dutch joint venture, where we were basically working with the client, finally putting it all together. And then this really surreal closing where everything had to be done because it was so, the structure was so intricate that each step had to happen in the right order.
Yeah.
So we had everything down to 5-minute increments, running through hundreds of steps, and it was one conference call where we started at 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever, and then you'd go around the world dialing in China step 1, and you'd patch in the Chinese team, and then Italy step 1, and so on, and go through the day, interspersed with total surrealism because. Getting into technicalities, but some of these, a number of these steps required the participation of notaries in the Netherlands and Germany. And some of your listeners may have, indeed, maybe some traumatic memories of the fact that German notaries have to read all documents out loud. So they can't just sign the thing. They've got to sit there reciting the document in German back at the people who drafted the thing. So we had to factor that into this whole day, where we'd go Germany step 1, we'd put them on the line and say, "Are you with the notary?" And they'd all go, "Yes, we're all in the notary's office." We go, "Okay, can the notary has he started speaking yet?" And we said, "Yeah, he's reading the document now." We go, "Okay, great. We'll come back to you." And so we'd have to put them on hold while they could read their thing, whip through a dozen other countries, and then come back to Germany and say, "Right, has he finished reading the thing yet?" And then anyway. So it was quite an experience. It also probably was a factor in making me think, I'm not sure I want to be doing this for the rest of my professional career. But it was certainly a highlight of the experience, and I learned an awful lot.
Yeah, I mean, what a mammoth thing to be part of. 42 different local councils, multi-jurisdictional to the max. I can imagine that was a lot of hard work and a lot of effort. But thanks for sharing that. I think that's a really interesting experience that you had. And then so from obviously, Clifford Chance, move on, you then sort of, become group corporate counsel for the group fashion group. What did your role involve with them? What were some of your responsibilities that you had?
Yeah, so I joined Global Fashion Group because I started to get interested in startups, and I thought, rightly or wrongly, that at CC there wouldn't be that much opportunity to sort of be part of that scene. I was sort of reading all these things about fundraisings and tech, and it all looked quite cool. And I thought, maybe I should go and be part of that. Actually, the last few years, tech practice at Clifford Chance has been going through the roof. So, what do I know? But so Global Fashion Group. It was and it is basically a holding company now listed in Frankfurt. Then privately held by a bunch of venture capital funds. And they own a bunch of e-commerce fast fashion businesses around the world. So if you think of a business like ASOS or like Boohoo.com, they owned businesses a bit like that, but in South America, Southeast Asia, Australia. So the ASOS's main competitor in Australia is a company called The Iconic, that's owned part of this group. Russia, and at the time, India and the Middle East. So I thought, right, it's sort of startup-y, but big enough that actually some of my skills for Clifford Chance and global experience, blah, 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 that might be useful. So the General Counsel has said to me, you're not going to do much corporate work here. It's transferable skills. That's great. But you'll be doing other stuff. But lo and behold, it's pretty much wall-to-wall corporate deals for 2 years while I was there. And it all quite kicked off within a few weeks of me joining. So I joined at the tail end of a fundraising round. We closed that within probably 6 weeks or so of me joining the company. And that sort of set the tone for the whole thing. So we did at least 2 fundraising rounds while I was there. The group went through a bit of a strategic change that expanded very quickly in the years before I joined, and that ended up in a bunch of markets that they probably didn't want to be in. So we shared businesses in Thailand and Vietnam. India was a big one. And then sold the business in the Middle East, which actually was a real start. I was over in Dubai a few weeks ago, and everyone knows about that business. It's called Napshi, and it's one of the big fashion e-commerce businesses out there. And in that case, they had an offer from a sort of local huge conglomerate. So got to fly to Dubai to work on that. We had a small English business that we sold to Tuka Silliman of Dragon's Den fame. So negotiating with him was quite an experience as well. It was actually ended up being a lot of M&A, a lot of fundraising. And it was a real case of that phrase, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. Yeah. So I basically joined at a point where I was the guy who'd done some corporate deals. So I ended up getting to do probably, in terms of deal volume, more M&A than I did in 2 years at GFG than in, the previous, maybe even 4 years or so at Clifford Chance. Much smaller, but just very quickly, as this group reshaped, buying a bit, selling a bit, raising some money, it was a real whirlwind of corporate work, which for me was great to have that experience on the in-house side.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of blended up your experience nicely and rounded it very nicely with, obviously, like you say, the private practice and in-house side. And you'd amassed all of this experience, all of this knowledge, and then all of this passion. So then in 2019, you founded Crafty Counsel. So bringing joy, insight, and connection to in-house legal professionals. So can you tell us more about what the platform does?
Yeah, sure. So we are a community and media platform for in-house lawyers. What that means is that we're doing events and content, and also just starting market research and benchmarking for in-house. So we could go into those in a bit more detail, but the overall vision is, reflecting back on my experience at Global Fashion Group. You had a kind of medium-sized legal team, a handful of lawyers in London, more people around the world. And it can feel a little bit isolating. You go from a law firm where you have every expert under the sun is around there to support you. There's huge infrastructure, and then a legal team. Typically, you are specialists within the business. Other people in the business often are a little bit wary of the lawyers. Don't quite know what they do. They know that they have this sort of feeling of am I going to get into trouble? And it's quite tricky. And also, if you're in a company that's going through a lot of change or growing faster, at the company that I was in, you're constantly doing new things. So you're inventing new processes and new ways of doing things, new products, new markets, etc. And so I found it's quite hard to get a perspective of what good looks like. So what do people normally do? I felt that sometimes I was working on things where I thought, I feel like I'm reinventing the wheel here. Someone else, like me, must have done this many, many times over. So that feeling of isolation and that there'd be a real value in having a really vibrant in-house community and being able to share perspectives either together in person or through podcasts, video, articles, etc. I thought there was something there. At the time, I was watching a lot of TED Talks, and I thought, there should be more stuff like this for legal. Something that's exciting, a bit of a brand, sharing some of the cool stuff that people have been up to. So I had this sort of mishmash of thoughts around that. And I also look back at my private practice days and remember writing lots of client briefings and sending it to clients, and they broadly went, oh, like, I've had 5 on this topic this week already. This particular one didn't land that right. And I thought maybe there's actually something there where you could build a company that is for in-house, and you could probably also help and commercialize by working with law firms and others around legal to help them with their messaging. So basically, help them with their marketing, do some content with them, invite them to events, etc., etc. So that was a little bit of the jumble of thoughts that eventually turned into Crafty Counsel. But right now, so community, we run a very active and fast-growing community of in-house lawyers. What people get is, it's all free, right? It's free to join, hence perhaps why it's growing quickly. So you get allocated into a sector group depending on who you are. So if you're in a FTSE 100, you'll join FTSE and Friends, which is our group for FTSEs and big private companies, government, etc. If you're in-house in a venture capital fund or private equity, then you'll be in Fundtastic, which is our group for senior in-house lawyers in PE and VC. If you're in a startup, then you'll be in our high growth group. And those are probably 3 of our most active groups. We've got one for sole counsel called Legal, there's a juniors one, etc. So depending on your group, you then get invitations to very regular Zoom calls where you get to meet with your peers. There's always a theme, sometimes a guest speaker, all Chatham House. So this morning there was a session on remote working, but particularly people working overseas. So what do you want to do this post-COVID? Are we post-COVID? But wherever we are, world of more flexibility. People asking, actually, I might just move to France. Can I just work in France for a while? Is that going to be all right? How often do I have to come back to the office? Where are you recruiting people from? So that was a session this morning. Legal ops, legal tech, working with law firms. So all this stuff happening over Zoom. And then each group, we get people together for a quarterly dinner or a breakfast as well. We'll usually have a sponsor for one of those. So a law firm will come and give a presentation, or a tech company, something like that. And we're doing a big event in the summer. So Crafty Fest, so that's going to be our big sort of conference cum festival crossover.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk more about that just in a moment. Time for a quick break from the show. Are you a legal aid practitioner in England and Wales, specializing in civil or criminal legal aid matters? If you are, this message is for you. As a legal aid solicitor, you don't have time to waste on legal aid case management software that doesn't work to your needs. That's why Clio has developed a quicker, more accurate and affordable solution for legal aid solicitors in England and Wales. It could save you hours in your month, particularly when it comes to end-of-month invoicing and claims to the legal aid agency. To see how it all works, visit clio.com/UK/legal aid. That's Clio, CLIO.com/UK/legal aid. Now back to the show. I want to ask 2 quick questions. You mentioned before you didn't always see your career staying as a lawyer. So did you always know you wanted to set up your own business at some point?
I think that was a seed that started to grow. I don't mixing metaphors, but I think early on in my time at CC, I started to think there might be something there. I felt like partly Clifford Chance was a really, really good business education, and I liked more and more. I liked the idea of doing something creative. And I think creating a business is something creative. So one thing I didn't mention is that when I was at Oxford, I was a real theft. My thing was that I was always putting on plays. In fact, my now wife and I, we got together at the cast party of one of the plays that we put on. So I sort of had this creative thing which I buried for a while, I think. And entrepreneurialism, I think, is a way to it is a way to be creative in business. You just, there's a thing, Crafty Counsel. It was in my head. Now it exists. It's very different to the thing that was in my head. Like, it's taken many twists and turns, but it's, the world now has something in it, for better or worse, which just wasn't there before. A number of people are employed by it. People have made friends, found jobs, met through it. So yeah, that's it. I had this entrepreneurial itch, which sort of I wanted to scratch, but I spent a long time unsure as to how I was going to do that. And there were a number of reasons for leaving Clifford Chance, but I think one of them was I wasn't quite sure how this idea of doing something entrepreneurial, how I would do that, what that would manifest into. But I was pretty sure that it wasn't going to happen in the state of Clifford Chance. Because I wasn't going to get the headspace to work on something. I didn't quite have the inspiration. I think I needed to sort of shake it up a bit and go somewhere else to see what that might, to find myself, to see what that might be.
And moving back to Crafty Counsel there, because the word of the moment is definitely community, and I think organizations that haven't got their head around that need to get their head around that sharpish. And so how did you begin to build such an inclusive community? Because it's tremendous what you've achieved.
Well, thank you. The truth is that I started it very, very originally. The first manifestation, I was more thinking about content. So we were doing videos and we were publishing those on LinkedIn. Those were getting a really good reaction. I was thinking about that TED analogy in terms of watching TED Talks on YouTube. And I was thinking really content. And we invested a lot into getting really good at video for in-house. And the interesting thing, the thing that I missed at the outset was I think the reason why people were finding it engaging and enjoying what was happening was actually because of community. And people enjoyed seeing their friends on screen, and they enjoyed being in it and sharing some ideas. And that was the little kernel of community that we were creating. And at the beginning of 2020, at the beginning of COVID, we did a bunch of roundtables with some of the people who were involved with Crafty Counsel. And the overwhelming feedback was they said, we think you're making a community, but you might not know it yet because you're just doing content. But the reason the content is interesting is because of the community. And we assume that one day you're going to open this up, you're going to bring us together. I was on one of these workshops and they said, you should just be doing this. And I remember saying, but you're kind of doing us a favor by coming and sharing your thoughts about Crafty Counsel. And they said, yes, true. But also, I hadn't met this. It's all on Zoom. And they were saying, well, we haven't met each other. That's person interesting. Their problem is a bit like my problem. Actually, this is what the thing that you've built is ready made to be doing more of this. So it's a real wake-up call. But actually, literally, we were told by our early Crafty Counsel fans, be a community because you've kind of made one. So own it. So that was interesting. So we then had a very rapid pivot in 2020. So we're now 2 years on from that, where we went from being purely content, and I was positioning the company for a while as more like a video training do your CPD through Crafty Counsel, and actually missing the trick that community was the thing. And now 2 years on from that, that's been the big unlock. So I think, as you say, community's become this, it's the word of the moment. I think we caught that wave at the right time. I think there's a lot for us still to do, a lot. We've grown the community very fast, and that's our big priority this year. That was the initial inspiration. And then it's been a lot of nurturing. It's been really talking with people. What does community mean? What does it mean in this context? What are the rituals of our community? What do they want to do? Where do they live? We do a lot of what we do is getting people together over Zoom. Whereas, if you read about communities in tech, for example, the assumption in a lot of cases that's primarily something that lives on Slack or some other digital message board. And we have that. We use something called Guild, which is a really good Slack-like community tool where you can get a bit more information on who people are, you can see a profile, etc., etc. But interestingly, it's the Zoom and the live interaction, seeing people, and now the in-person events. That has been where most of the magic has been happening.
Yeah. And magic indeed. And it's great to hear the journey of how far you've come and, taking that pivot, because, you're talking my language, community. It's what I eat, breathe and sleep, with the Legally Speaking podcast and everything we do. I think it's so important. And with Crafty Counsel, there are 3 pillars that form Crafty Counsel, my understanding. So you've got the Crafty Counsel, the Craft Community, and the Crafty Studios. So would you mind explaining a little bit more about each area?
Yeah, sure. So the way I explain it is actually there's actually 4 bits, right? So we're a content publisher. So we do our own editorial content, which consists of interviews with interesting in-house lawyers or people relevant to them, profiles of teams, features on the latest issue of the day, etc. So that's a publishing bit. All that is free, published through our newsletter, LinkedIn, website, etc., etc. Crafty Counsel Studios is where that's basically our creative agency, working with law firms, recruiters, legal tech, the likes of LexisNexis. And that's where we basically take all the content ability that we've got, so all that creative stuff, and then we marry it with the legal stuff. So I think we are trying to carve out a particular niche where we are a creative agency for legal, and we are, and so we help law firms, for example, on video content. Typically, what ends up being created is a marketing campaign that we publish through Crafty Counsel. So we'll publish, say, Crafty Counsel in collaboration with Norton Rose Fulbright or DLA Piper, who are 2 of our current clients, where we do a video series, we create it together. We co-brand it, we publish it together. What's a bit different about that versus, say, some of the other legal media platforms is that we don't take a law firm client briefing and then just distribute that. We're basically, in media land, you call this a branded campaign. So we're collaborating with them to make content which is kind of on brand for us, and is just as good as all the other content that we do, but it's very much like a collaboration with us once. So we've done the publishing bit, Crafty Counsel Studios. The community is then getting everyone together over Zoom, on Guild, the platform that I mentioned for message board and messaging each other and stuff, and events. And that event side has been really grown hugely since Q4 last year when we kicked that off. We do every quarter now, we do multiple dinners and breakfasts for each part of the community. So the Footsie and Friends dinner, the High Growth dinner. We also do some thematic stuff. So we're doing a whole series with Reed Smith this year on ESG, which again is one of the topics of the moment. So we had our kickoff dinner on that a few weeks ago. And for that one, we pulled people from across all the different sector groups that we have. So we have people from Footsie, we have people from Fantastic, people from Lean Legal, etc. In to discuss ESG with Reed Smith over dinner. Publishing, creative studios, community, and the last bit which is new is insights. And that is led by my colleague Sonia Hajjaj. She's our Chief Insights Officer, ex-GC, and she is building up there a new proposition on market research, consulting, benchmarking, basically just pulling on the fact that we're privy to all these conversations in our community, and very often we can see what we're hearing from in-house lawyers about what they want and how they work and the challenges that they have is often somewhat at odds with what you hear in the market. And so we think there's something that we can do there to go a little bit deeper. In the first instance, working with law firms and others in the market on white papers, research, surveys, focus groups, stuff like that. So leveraging our network, our content creation, and our insight from what we're seeing. So those are the 4 bits: the publishing, studios, community, insight.
Yeah, love it. And it's just so right for the times that we're in, and so ahead as well of many other organizations. So it's just fascinating to see what Crafty Counsel is doing. And you touched on it briefly before, but you do have some exciting news, because on the 14th of June, Regent's Park, you're holding Crafty Fest. So can you give us a bit more insight into the event and how people can maybe get involved?
Yeah, fab. Thanks, Rob. So Crafty Fest this is the first of what will become our flagship event. So we're doing, for the community, we're doing all these dinners and breakfasts that I mentioned. But we felt that we really need to put down a marker that every year we'll do something big, something fun, something important. And a real celebration in-house, but also with some substantive content there. So the plan is, this is the first one. We're going to learn and grow for future years. But what we're doing is, we're in Regent's Park. There is, actually, unbeknownst to me, as a Londoner for all my life, there is a university in Regent's Park called Regent's University. So with that, lovely Victorian building. They've got sweeping lawns, in like private lawns as part of the park. So we've got outside, big marquee, we've got a band. We've got, it looks like one of the GCs in our community will be playing. I think we haven't fully confirmed, but I think we're there now. So that'll be fun. Treasure hunt, games, barbecue, etc., etc. So real celebration going on outside. And then inside, we've got the lecture theatre at university, and we're using that for a full content program. And what we're doing, I think it's a little bit different. We're following the life cycle of a company as it pertains to in-house legal. So we start at the beginning of the day with you're the first general counsel, first lawyer into some company that's maybe just done its Series A or about to do its Series A. What's that like? How do you prepare for that? Then we segue into product expansion, market expansion. Then we have a whole session dedicated to exit. So we've got the panel on being acquired. So we've got 2 GCs talking about what that was like. So when their company was bought, what changed, what was different, how did the culture change? IPO. So people who've been through that experience. We've got one person whose company SPAC'd, so special purpose acquisition company. So effectively listed in New York. Another was IPO'd in London. And then we've got a GC who previously was at a fintech that went bust. So that's what this was like, literally being the last employee, literally having to fire everyone and figure out like how do we pay our creditors and return such money as around to investors. So that's the morning, and then in the afternoon we get on to more listed companies, sort of enterprise level stuff. We're doing some networking exercises. We're doing a whole session on legal ethics. We've got Professor Richard Moorhead, who is the probably the foremost expert on ethics for in-house lawyers in the UK. Professor of Law at Exeter University. He's coming and he's leading a session there. And a bunch of case studies and other stuff in the afternoon. So that's the idea. It's following a life cycle of a company, and then with that, it's it's very much speaking to our community, where we've got people from across that cross section as well, and we're putting the community on stage for the presentation. So that's what's going on.
Jam-packed, not to be missed. Sounds super, super exciting and full of content, full of great networking opportunities. So yeah, really great to see that being launched. And I can't wait to see the future of Crafty Counsel as well. And on that, I guess, finally, if our listeners do want to learn more about Crafty Counsel or Crafty Fest, where can they find out more?
Well, you Google Crafty Fest. So there's a landing page just for Crafty Fest. So yeah, Google Crafty first. It should be the first hit that you come up with. Otherwise, our website is craftycounsel.co.uk. Website has actually been completely overhauled. I think everyone always says it. So we're just changing our website, but we are. Like new website is coming out soon. So but that's where we are. craftycounsel.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn every day. So if you find me on there, I'm the only Ben White at Crafty Counsel. So I'd love to speak to any of your listeners. For us, as you picked up in the conversation, Rob, it's all about community. So always keen to meet new people, either in-house lawyers who want to get involved, or indeed friends from law firms, legal tech, the wider ecosystem who would like to know more about how they can get involved as well.
Well, Ben, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. So from all of us on the Legally Speaking podcast, I'd like to wish you lots of continued success with Crafty Counsel, your career and future pursuits. But for now, from all of us, over and out. This week's review comes from Maddie Pars. 5 stars. Love it. Highly recommend. Maddie, we really appreciate your kind words. Simplicity at its finest. We really appreciate you. Thanks so much once again.